In this video, we'll look at 20 idioms about books and reading. So grab a notebook and let's get started. Our first idiom is to read the room, and this means to understand the emotions and thoughts of the people present to determine what would be appropriate or inappropriate to say or do. My first example says, when the comedian realized that his jokes were falling flat, he read the room and changed his approach. When a joke falls flat, it means somebody tells a joke and nobody laughs at it. My second example says, before giving her speech, the politician took a moment to read the room and adjust her talking points based on the audience's mood. My next idiom, to read between the lines, means to understand what someone really means or what is really happening in a situation, even though it is not said openly. This first example says, although he said he was fine, I could tell from his tone that something was really bothering him. I had to read between the lines to figure out what was really going on. My next example says, the email from my boss was short and to the point, but I could tell from the tone that she was not happy with my work. I had to read between the lines to understand what changes she wanted me to make. Here we have the idiom to hit the books, and this just means to study. My first example says, with final exams just around the corner, it was time to hit the books and start studying. My next example says, the new intern knew she had a lot to learn, so she decided to hit the books and read up on the industry. This idiom, to throw the book at someone, means to punish someone as severely as possible. My first example says, when the employee was caught stealing office supplies, the boss decided to throw the book at him and fire him on the spot. My next example says, the judge was known for being tough on criminals, and he would often throw the book at them and give them the maximum sentence allowed by the law. The maximum sentence would be the largest fine or the longest jail time that you would give a criminal who is convicted for committing a particular crime. This idiom, to use every trick in the book, is to do everything one can to achieve something. My two examples say, the experienced salesperson used every trick in the book to persuade his client to make the purchase. My next one says, the football team tried every trick in the book to win the game, but they still lost in the end. Our idiom, the oldest trick in the book, means something completely different, and this is a dishonest method of doing something that has been used many times before. The con artist used the oldest trick in the book and convinced the elderly couple to transfer their savings to him. And he tried to pull the oldest trick in the book by pretending to be a lost tourist, but the experienced cop wasn't fooled. This idiom, to turn the page, means to make a new start after periods of difficulties. After the divorce, it was time for her to turn the page and start a new chapter in her life. And when the athlete suffered a career-ending injury, it was time for him to turn the page and start focus on recovery and life away from sports. Our next idiom, to balance the books, means to make certain the amount of money spent is not more than the amount of money received. This first example says, the small business owner was having trouble balancing the books, so she hired a financial advisor to help her get back on track. And my next example says, after submitting the budget proposal, the team had to balance the books and make sure that they could afford all of the proposed expenses. This idiom, by the book, means exactly according to the rules or the law. This first example says, the doctor was careful to follow the treatment guidelines and do everything by the book to ensure that her patients received the best care possible. My next sentence says, when it came to safety procedures, the construction company always did things by the book to avoid accidents. Our next idiom, to cook the books, means to change official accounting records in order to deceive or mislead. When the company was audited, it was discovered that they had been cooking the books for years to hide their financial losses. This next sentence says, the small business owner was caught cooking the books to avoid paying taxes and was fined heavily as a result. Our idiom, to take a leaf out of someone's book, means to copy something that someone else does because it will bring you advantages. If you want to be more organized, take a leaf out of my book and start using a digital planner. And when the athlete saw how hard his teammate trained, he decided to take a leaf out of his book and start pushing himself harder during practice. Our idiom, a closed book, is a person or thing that is difficult to understand. Although she had worked with her coworker for years, she still felt like he was a closed book and she didn't really know much about his personal life. My next sentence says, my introverted classmate is like a closed book, leaving me to wonder what he is thinking about all the time. Our idiom, an open book, means a person that is easy to know what they are thinking or how they are feeling. The talkative teenager was an open book and loved to share details about her life with anyone who would listen, and the therapist encouraged her clients to be open books during their sessions so that she could help them work through their problems more effectively. Our next idiom here, to read someone's mind, means to know exactly what someone is thinking without them telling you. It's almost like my best friend can read my mind because she always knows exactly what I'm thinking. And the psychic claimed to be able to read people's minds, but most people were skeptical of her abilities. This idiom, to read someone like a book, means to understand easily what someone thinks or feels. The detective was able to read the suspect like a book and knew his alibi was a lie. An alibi is a statement made by a suspect that they were somewhere else during the crime, so they couldn't have possibly committed the crime. My next sentence says, most experienced teachers can read their students like a book and know when they are struggling. This idiom, to read someone the riot act, means to speak angrily to someone about something they have done, to warn that person that they will be severely punished if it happens again. My first example says, after finding out that his employees had been stealing office supplies, the manager read them the riot act and threatened to fire anyone who was caught doing it again. This next sentence says, the landlord read her tenants the riot act after their rent payment was late several times. Our idiom here, to be in one's good books, means to be regarded favorably by someone, thought kindly of, or approvingly by one. The teenager stayed out of trouble and did well in school, so she was in her parents' good books and they allowed her to attend a concert with her friends. Our next example says, the employee stayed late to finish a project for his boss, so he was in her good books and was given a raise. To read the small print or the fine print means to make oneself aware of the specific terms, conditions, restrictions, limitations of an agreement, contract, or other document. This first example says, before signing the contract, the lawyer advised her client to read the small print carefully to avoid any surprises later on. This next sentence says, when the customer bought the product, she made sure to read the fine print on the warranty to understand what was covered and what wasn't. Our idiom here, to have one's nose in a book, means to be reading a book. Whenever he has some free time, the literature professor can be found with his nose in a book, either reading or researching. My next sentence says, I prefer to have my nose in a book rather than socialize with coworkers during lunch breaks. This idiom here, don't judge a book by its cover, means one shouldn't make a judgment about someone or something based on the person's or thing's appearance. This first sentence says, although the car was old and beat up, it was still reliable and got great gas mileage. It was a good reminder not to judge a book by its cover. This next sentence says, when the shy student started participating in class, the teacher realized that he was very intelligent and talented. It was a good reminder not to judge a book by its cover. Thank you for joining me. I hope at least one of these 20 idioms were new to you. Be sure to use these the next time you are speaking with someone in English, or create your own example sentences down in the comments. See you in the future!